to Leaders in the Arena. My name is Jenny Whitener, and I'm the CEO of Bridge Innovate, and it's our pleasure to welcome you today. Bridge Innovate is focused on empowering teams to lead, think, and problem solve differently. We do that through a variety of ways, from our consulting services to our future lab, design sprints, to learning programs. And of course, if you just like to hang out in a really cool studio, we'd love to see you here in Chattanooga to do some cool work together. But what's most important is today we have an amazing guest with us, Charlie Ursell. He's going to be talking to us about the hidden catalyst, group intelligence and innovation. He is the managing director at Tidal Co. So I am going to just come off of that for a second, and I want to make sure that I have a chance to share with you a little bit about his background, and then I'm going to ask him to cover that in a little bit more depth. So hang with me just for a second. Charlie and I met actually at an MG Taylor event. It's a group of professionals that are very focused on co-design, and we've had an opportunity to team up and compare notes on a number of different collaborative efforts. So let me just introduce Charlie properly. Charlie is an award-winning consultant with a first-class honors degree in international business, finance, and economics. Won't hold that against you, Charlie. His career spans from impactful roles at EY, Capgemini, to creating new engagement methodologies on an international scale. As an expert in the MG Taylor method and process for collaborative design and multi-stakeholder engagement, Charlie stands as one of the few global masters and the sole accredited practitioner in Canada. His ethos, people love what they design and own what they create, reflects his comments to fostering ownership and lasting impact through the participatory processes. This belief has underpinned a career marked by leading Capgemini's global accelerated solutions environment capability. And believe me, folks, if you're joining today, that is an extraordinary role that we have him here with us today. That's a very honorary and important role. And then he's also been involved in innovating curriculum and accreditation processes and practices from IAP2 to systems thinking and design thinking and dialogue mapping. Now calling Vancouver home, Charlie is deeply invested in the region's future, both professionally and personally, as he raises his family there. So Charlie, thank you so much for being with us today. I just, again, cannot say how excited. I've got like goosebumps that you're with us, right? And so please, share a little bit more about yourself, help the audience know a little bit more about you, and we'll jump into today's program.
Well, thank you, Jenny. I'm very excited to be here. You can probably tell my funny accent doesn't fit with my adopted home of Canada. I'm calling today from Lekwungen speaking territory, which is the home of the saltwater and salmon people, and it's my adopted home. I'm very grateful to be here and very grateful to run Tidal Co from this place. Funny accent is originally from London, England. So please, as we go through this, if some Britishisms still emerge, stop me and we'll address them. This is a topic so close to my heart and one that I think is so relevant for anyone operating an organization or leading an organization today. So looking forward to jumping in.
Well, let's do it. Let's go right at it. Let's start with the most important thing. What makes large-scale transformation so difficult in today's environment?
Well, Jenny, I think you and I have probably both heard in boardrooms for the last 10 to 15 years what's almost become a cliche, that tagline of, the rate of change is just so much greater outside of our organization than it is inside of our organization. And that's almost become a cliche. It's kind of, you knew so much. But what I'd offer is that today it's gone from a cliche into a double bind. Because that rate of change is so great, organizations are constantly having to evolve. They're constantly having to iterate faster and faster. But also individually, we're swimming upstream just to keep up. The rate of change of AI and the meta forces that's pushing into the world, the way in which business models are quickly innovating and spinning on a dime, meaning that the old models that we used to have around change and change management, which were generally linear models, things like ProSci and ADKAR, which follows a linear step of processes, in this non-linear world are now creating a challenge and a need to think differently about particularly large scale organizational-wide transformation. And I think a way to describe that is an increase in complexity. And when the time's right, I've got a bit of a model I'd like to share, a wonderful work of a guy called David Snowden on this increasingly complex world that's a result of that incredibly rapid change.
That's great. I love the fact that you're helping us just begin by taking a breath and really acknowledging this rate of change, right? I was actually with another leadership team earlier this week, and we were talking about some of the extraordinary innovations that came out during the pandemic, during the COVID crisis. And one of the examples we were looking at was Airbnb and how, you know, their business went from like this scaling to crashing. The CEO brought the team together, and in 14 days, they launched online experiences. So, I think when real crisis hits, there's many times that we'll pivot as a human race to come up with a solution. But I think your call to us is really important. This pace of change is almost pushing us to be at this kind of ongoing crisis level all the time. So, and this is where we need help. So talk about this a little bit more, because one of the most difficult things, you talked about ADKAR and ProSign, this method, but it doesn't work all the time. It's not linear. So what are the real keys for mobilizing people towards change? And then how do you tap the leadership team to get connected into that?
Yeah, great question. And I'm going to share a model by a gentleman called David Snowden here. So full attribution to him and the work that he did at IBM. And for me, the critical part to this is to think about the context that we're operating within. David is a gentleman from Wales, and there's a Welsh word called cynefin, which is the word for habitat. And our habits grow in our habitats, hence the word's habits, and those rituals become part of those habitats. And in this increasing rate of change, that adage came to mind as you were sharing the story of the Airbnb leadership team of never waste a crisis. We've moved from clear situations that we all understand, that we have a shared understanding of, that we experience many different times, into complicated worlds, which, like kind of that world of ERP where you've got SAP implementations, and there's not an exact best practice way of doing things. There's kind of good practice where you need to choose between those things, into a world of complexity, and even at times into a world of chaos. And I think the challenge in unlocking the potential, the creative potential of teams and of people, is to acknowledge that in simple and clear situations, there can be a best practice. ADKAR is a great example of that. And there are times and places where that's very valuable. However, as we step into complexity, there is no best practice and there's no good practice to choose from. There's an emergent practice. And that innovation that you're describing with the Airbnb example of in 14 days unlocking something, within 20 minutes using apps like Lovable to spin up prototypes of apps, phenomenal rates of change that we can now embrace and play with, requires us to challenge some of those mental models. It requires us to think differently about how we're showing up. And I think the first part to that is taking a step back and going, what is the context that we're operating within here? What's the situation? Is this a basic situation where there is a best practice? Is it something where there's actually good practices that apply? Or in fact, are we finding ourselves in the world of complexity where there is not yet a best practice to choose from? And it's an emergent practice. It's one that requires collaboration, and it's one that requires collective intelligence to unlock the required value and solve the complex challenge of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think the model helped us to understand kind of what the context might be that we're in. You used at the end there, you talked about collaboration, and I know that's near and dear to the work that you do and to your heart and to what really makes your work very powerful. When we're dealing with this high degree of complexity and chaos, I thought that was excellent. Why does collaboration work? Why doesn't that, one might say by bringing a group of people together that are in chaos, you're going to just have more chaos. So why would the collaborative process be able to deal with that level of complexity and chaos? Why is that a method that works?
And I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, Jenny, especially for a collaborative design practitioner. It doesn't always work.
Ah, love it, love it.
I'd say actually collaboration is an incredibly expensive and risky endeavor and needs to be treated incredibly carefully for it to work. So instead of saying why, I'm going to kind of focus on the how. How does collaboration work and how does it unlock that creative potential? My belief is that collaboration needs to be very carefully designed. It needs to be collaboration by design as opposed to just by default. Putting a bunch of people in a room seldom unlocks the power that's required. And so the first part of that is a clear purpose, a clear why, and a clear intent for bringing a group of people together. In our back-to-back days where we're struggling to find a restroom break in between Zoom meetings, team meetings, and the odd in-person hybrid thing going on, it's very hard to explain why somebody should give up 2 hours, never mind 2 days or 3 days of their time. So anchoring it in a compelling purpose of why. Why is this important? Why is this transformation required? Why are we gathering for whatever period of time it might be is key. And turning that into tangible objectives, very specific things that we're hoping to achieve together, and then creating the framework within which that takes place. What are we collaborating on? What are the non-negotiables? What are the givens of this situation? What are we not collaborating on? Which isn't the fun stuff to say. And a belief that I've generated over time is this concept of disappointment equals expectations minus reality.
Wow.
The challenge of collaboration is that if we believe we have a tabula rasa situation where we can create anything we want and it will move forwards, that expectation is seldom grounded in the reality of what unfolds after a workshop or brainstorming process or even a meeting to progress a project. And so in that world where disappointment equals expectations minus reality, it becomes very important up front to have the tough conversations as a leader around what are the boundaries within which we are collaborating and what's that playing field where we can have some fun together.
Right. So I hear what you're saying. So this chaotic, complex change is accelerating, bringing people together in a collaborative environment. It can have real impact, but it has to be done properly. I don't know if that's the right word, but it has to be done masterfully, maybe is the proper word, where you're establishing all those ground rules, you're establishing context, you're setting goals, you're what's in scope, what's out of scope. And it's through that type of masterful collaboration structuring that you can really make progress versus having more chaos, right? And so I think that is and that's what you do so masterfully. But one thing that we didn't talk about, and I want to just go back to it for a second, and that is the role of the leader. Because I think often we think we bring together a group of bright people around some complex challenge. And through this collaboration process that you're going to structure masterfully, we're going to come out with something. But what is this role of the leader to really unlock their potential? And what's been your secret sauce there?
Yeah. Leading by example, the process itself is recursive, right? And if we think about the rate of change for a second again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, AI is now mainstream. It's not something that's happening in the sidelines. Any organization that isn't embracing AI is going to struggle. And the role of the leader is to explain vulnerably that context. We don't quite know where this is going. We're creating an experiment. We're creating a safe space, and I'm role modeling that to my team. Understanding that we don't have all the answers. No individual possesses the complete answer, and that's the purpose of the collaboration. So the role of that leader, of the individual, to role model the why and the how around the uncertainties and be vulnerable in those uncertainties becomes increasingly important. That translates to the team, which translates to the departments, which translates to the organization. And that role of the leader is gone from pretending we know everything because we don't live in this simple, clear situation, to having confidence in the process that they are designing, to having confidence in the design of their organizational structure, their organizational development, and their processes, so that they can lead through that uncertainty. And that's quite a different leadership style to, I've got all the answers and this is what you need to do. But those are very different leaders that are required in this world of complexity that we're in today.
I love the fact you're asking them to model it, right? And to set the stage for it. It makes the word, when you're telling that story about great leader, like pulling that from their team, humility, like being able to just say, look, I don't have all the answers. That's why we're pulling all of you together, right? And sort of modeling by working together, the best will surface, the best ideas will surface. You mentioned in your description that the fact that now AI is mainstream. And I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I just did my first lovable app and I was so fired.
Right on. Yeah.
I never thought I could be a developer. And I'm really not, because it wasn't that great an app, but it was because I think of my prompting. But anyway, I'm off track. Talk a little bit more about the role of AI or generative AI in elevating collaboration, because I think in the traditional old school, people would think of collaboration as bringing together people. And there's this debate, discourse, conversation, brainstorming, all this stuff going on. Well, so how do you plug in generative AI into that to make it even more powerful?
I've found three ways have great leverage. The first is AI is not here to replace us. It's here to augment with us and be a thought partner. Having a very direct conversation, particularly generative AI, we'll talk about process AI maybe another time. But in that Gen AI world, having a thought partner that can play a plethora of different roles. Play the role of an engineer who has an MBA, who's from an indigenous background, and how they might think about this setting enables us as designers of processes, enables leaders of organizations to understand the diversity of lenses that are there. And there are often missing lenses in a conversation. Any company always says we need to put the customer at the heart of what we do. And how often do they actually get to have a meaningful conversation with their customers? So being able to play the role of a persona, have your Gen AI, whichever that might be, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, whatever platform in the Gen AI space is your organization's go-to, asking them to play that role, helping to understand and further one's thinking can really provide a lens into the conversation in a very efficient and a very effective way. I think it can also help to unstick teams. So you spoke in your introduction, I have a strong belief that people love what they design and people own what they create. If a group of people have come together and they've worked together to create something, they have ownership for it. It's theirs. It's a bit like a rental car versus a little wooden rowing boat that you've made. You're going to look after that little wooden rowing boat way better than, no matter how good a human you are, than the rental car that you borrowed. That ownership also makes it very sticky. It's required because that's what really creates the stickability of outcome. But in this rate of change that we're in, there's a paradox where sometimes we need to really let go of the things that we're holding on to dearly and that we're holding on to tightly. And the power of Gen AI to go, hang on a minute, what are the things that we're holding on to that we perhaps shouldn't be? What are the constraints that we've created for ourselves? And how do we not end up like the Shire horse who believes that they are stuck in that field, but actually
I love this.
has a false set of constraints? I think Gen AI has an amazing power to be able to unstick those situations.
Right. Very, very interesting. Just kind of reflecting back on what you were just sharing about how AI can augment our work, can be a companion or, a complement to the human perspective. And when you were talking about it being a persona, I heard this word recently, and I think it's mainstream, but, I don't get out a lot. It's called the synthetic persona. Did I get that right? And so it's so funny that when we want customer intimacy so much that we can turn to generative AI to feed it enough information that it becomes a fake customer, a synthetic customer. And we can then take prototypes and concepts and then ask the synthetic, customer and AI how they would react to that. I think it's fabulous. It's so very contradictory in your head, right? That you could go there and do that, but it's happening now. I know, very mainstream. And then I also love the fact that you're saying that generative AI not only helps us very rapid customer feedback by preparing AI to be that customer perspective, but also the unsticking of teams. I know that we recently, a lot of times we were running into people on these design sprints or these collaborative sessions, and they may do maybe one of these every couple of years. I mean, it's not something they do every day. So I know we were at a design sprint of a company not long ago. We were talking to them about analogous inspiration, and you could just see they were glazing over, and they're like, I have no idea what this woman is talking about. But then when we gave them a sample prompt to go into AI and said, if you were to take the ideas that we have so far and then take the analogous situation of a drive-through fast food restaurant, what other ideas could you come up with? And then immediately through AI comes up all of these prepackaged drive-through, biggie, upsize, whatever, all this kind of stuff. It was completely amazing. So I love it. I'm so thrilled. I want to come to one of your sessions. I want you to show me, right? I want you to model that, right? I want to see that generative AI in action in your collaboration sessions.
And Brendan, while we're on the topic of sessions, which is a shared passion of both of us, design
Yes.
sprint sessions, I think the other thing that AI can enable that's very exciting, and my colleague Aaron Williamson has really been leading a whole bunch of experimentation and work in this space, is overcoming the extrovert bias. When you have a series of breakout groups and you've got 6 to 8 people working in parallel on ideas, and then they come back together to share their work, not everybody feels like they're going to be the person that picks up the microphone and goes, hey everyone, here's what we did. Often those are the people who are more comfortable with grabbing a microphone, who tend to have more traditional extrovert tendencies. But also, there's a risk. There's a risk that they share what they heard and their ideas as opposed to the work of the group. And so through ambient listening, through the introduction of microphones into every breakout room, and through transcription of the information, and then asking AI to create a summary for the group of 6 to 8 people to collectively reflect back on, is a very different way of sharing information back. So that you're parallel processing in departments and in the teams, and then you come back and actually share. It's not the extrovert that picks up the microphone, but it's actually the AI providing an objective summary. And what we found through that process is that many of the points that would typically be the extrovert sharing what they heard versus what was actually said get picked up on and get brought into the center as opposed to being excluded. And that's very valuable to make sure that all voices are heard.
That's amazing. I had never thought of it that way. I mean, I know that we've been using, AI, generative AI to capture through focus groups or insight sessions. But this concept of being able to kind of mitigate the extrovert in the room and kind of normalize, give everybody, it's almost a very inclusive kind of capability that gives everyone's perspective equal weight, right? And bringing that to the forefront. I love that. I love that. Why is this important now? I mean, why is this whole concept of both collaboration, co-design, generative AI complements, why is all this important today?
Well, I'll come back to almost where we started, Jenny, with that. I believe we're living in a world of increased complexity, borderlining chaos, right? AI and the rate of change got quantum computing, and quantum computing is going to create huge impacts that we don't yet really understand, and is no longer the realms of Star Trek, even though they look super steampunky and kind of fun. The speed of processing is going to be there. We've had demographic shifts, and I'd offer that we live in an increasingly polarized world. Politically, it's very difficult to bridge divides, and we've got increasingly polarized populations in most countries, which is leading to a lack of trust in institutions, in organizations, in companies. And the risk for leaders is a lack of trust in leaders. And so the way I believe to tackle that meaningfully is to have clear purpose, to enable meaningful collaboration, to enable people who perhaps don't like each other or hold the same viewpoint to work together. And it's through that co-creation and working together that trust gets built. And we can acknowledge that we have different perspectives, and we should be disagreeing in meaningful ways, because that's ultimately what enables a strong design of solutions for consumer-facing organizations, for public sector organizations, and for multi-stakeholder groups.
Right, right. I love it. I this part that you're calling about around the polarization of our societies and today, that I think more than ever, this alignment on purpose, right, a good call out, that if we can agree that this is our purpose for coming together, and then I think through a facilitated collaborative process and co-design process, which you, I know, masterfully over the years have done for many big scale corporations, you're able to help people find the way to having that tough conversation, or you might call it productive discourse or constructive discourse. I mean, like whatever, courageous conversations, but where we can have these conversations, wrestle these issues, align to that purpose. But then the last part that you said was really critical, come out with increased levels of trust and almost like a professional, like camaraderie. I mean, I'm like saying you're not going to be best friends, but can I have some respectful, camaraderie here that, we might see differently, but we debated, we discussed, we explored, and then, but to achieve our purpose, we're going to go this way, right? And I think that the facilitator, right, the co-design facilitator can put together processes and structures to make that happen. And I think we forget that there are tools.
And I would also offer it's no longer only the role of that facilitator, it's also the role of leaders. And that's the role that leaders increasingly need to play within the organizations that they're in.
Very good insight. And in fact, most of them don't know anything about that. Because you look at the traditional hierarchy of management and the old traditional executive management, it was all very directional. The skills that they may have learned over the years, depending on what the level of seniority, I set the vision, I establish the goals or whatever, and then this is the direction, ready, set, run, versus this very open, collaborative discussion. What are the goals we should be setting? How should we position our competitive play in the market? That kind of thing, that very high collaborative thing. I love that you're calling that out. And a challenge to all leaders to build those skills. In fact, what are the practical steps leaders can do to build this capability? How do you turn that on?
Well, I mean, picking up on the thread, I've got sort of 5 things I'd like to finish with an offer. Re-examine your models, the mental models in particular. Often we're not working in the space of simplicity, where the things that made us successful in our careers in the past are going to help us create organizations who trust and believe in us as leaders. And so actually being able to re-examine those models and explore those mental models. The point that we were having around collaboration by design, not by default. Collaboration is an expensive activity. It can yield profound results. And when done poorly, it can be a very expensive waste of everybody's time and almost create disappointment. And so making sure there's a clarity of purpose and scope, and that we're addressing that ownership paradox, that horse with the reins tied to the plastic chair, which I love as a metaphor, helping to let go of the things of the past whilst welcoming the future. Inviting Gen AI in, using it deliberately and intentionally as a thought partner to stretch our thinking, to challenge our ideas. And all of that requires psychological safety, to the point of a polarized world that we live in, with increased polarized points of view, making it safe to challenge ideas and to let go of old ideas of the past. And then finally, the comment around purpose, and it's so recursive. The organizational purpose. Why does the organization exist? Having clarity on our why. That seldom changes over time. The how and the what, through innovation and everything else, will ultimately change. But having that clear organizational level purpose that translates down to every single meeting, every single workshop, and every single interaction is critical to bringing together that divided world that we now live in.
Amazing. I wish we had another half an hour because this could go, I'm sure, even further. I'm going to have a little cough here. Tell the group a little bit more about how they can be in touch.
Tidal Co. has just relaunched itself. We started off as Tidal Strategies. We've just rebranded. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find our website. I'm sure in some of the chat here, maybe we could pop it in. Be very keen to have a conversation with you. And I would say, Jenny, we are so grateful at Tidal for the collaboration with yourself and Bridge Innovate. I consider you a mentor in the work that we do, both in terms of building a meaningful organization that gives back to the communities and the societies that it operates in, but also adopts leading edge practices. And I'm so grateful to be in relationship with you and Bridge Innovate, and looking forward to the great work that we can do together as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Charlie Ursell. You are doing amazing things for this world through the leaders and the teams that you're working with. It's just been a treat to meet you over the last several years, to work with you and to admire you. Thanks for being with us today and sharing some insights. And I want to thank our participants also for joining the session live. It will be recorded and published on Leaders in the Arena, Bridge Innovate's podcast series, in a few days. So check us out at bridgeinnovate.com for more events coming up really soon. We hope to see you again. Thanks, Charlie. Have a great day.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye.